I recently saw a post soliciting Twitter for opinions on why the anime and manga fan base seems to be steadily growing and attracting legions of younger fans, while the American comic book industry only sees slow growth and is mostly made up of an older demographic. A lot of people weighed in, fan and industry professional alike, and they all made some really valid points. And it's a topic that resonates deeply with me. I am a lifelong fan of American comics. I was reading DC ever since I first learned how to read, and kept right on going straight through graduating college and joining the workforce. I co-founded a Green Lantern podcast that's still going 9 years later, and I still do read the Lantern books, though I'll often only get them out of habit and nostalgia. I've followed these series, read these characters for so much of my life that I can barely imagine a time when I'm not reading about them. But Green Lantern is the only holdout, as I've drifted away from all other American comics at this point. And I used to be way in. Giant stack of new books every Wednesday, living on DC and Marvel message boards, Alex Ross posters on my wall, the works. But now, as this channel proves, I've almost entirely replaced my comic fandom with a love of narrative works coming out of Japan. And that crowdsourced question really got me thinking about that. About what anime and manga are doing right that Marvel and DC are doing wrong. And I think that what it all comes down to is the barrier to entry and how you as a reader are marketed to when and if you make it inside. Jake Wyatt IRL hit the nail on the head when he pointed out that the way American publishers approach the creation and marketing of their product versus the way Japanese publishers do is like the difference between a shotgun and a sniper rifle. Marvel and DC want to make comics that appeal to everyone. They want their Batman book to be read by lifelong comic book fans, people who only know Batman from movies, people who only watch the cartoons or collect the toys, people who only know Adam West. They've spent a lifetime building Batman into a highly varied brand that appeals to completely different people for completely different reasons, and want all of those people to come buy their Batman comic. Whereas your typical anime or manga is much more straightforward, only usually concerning itself with one or two demographics at most. Do you like action and or comedy? Read Dragon Ball. Do you like sports and or romance? Watch Yuri on Ice. But the problem doesn't stop at casting too wide of a net. No, the business practices used by Marvel and DC to provoke more sales out of their existing readership can actively deter new readers from ever finding their point of entry. They know they have an audience of collectors and completionists, and that the top-selling issues tend to be a first issue and an anniversary issue. Publishers exploit that knowledge of their customers' buying habits to sell more copies, which isn't a bad thing. A publisher is supposed to be doing that. But because they're focusing so intensely on that core audience of collectors and completionists, it leads to publishing decisions that are downright ridiculous. Case in point, Captain America. Back in May of 2009, the then-current Captain America ongoing series reached issue 50. The very next month, instead of number 51, the June issue was Captain America number 600. See, Marvel realized that if you count everything, all the various series and relaunches, that many of their oldest characters would be at 600 issues if the original numbering had been allowed to continue, so they resumed that original numbering to celebrate and get a sales bump. 1 month later, in July of 2009, Marvel published Captain America Reborn #1, the first of a 6-part miniseries that would run at the same time as the core book. The ongoing series continued numbering in the 600s until September of 2011, when the book would be relaunched and renumbered again as Captain America #1. In the span of 3 months, Marvel published Captain America number 50, Captain America number 600, and Captain America Reborn #1, and then another Captain America #1 would come out just 2 years later. Not only does this completely destroy the usefulness of a numbering system, it makes the series nearly impenetrable for anyone who isn't already a lifelong reader. If you show someone Captain America number 600, a reasonable reaction by the average person is to think they might need to read the other 599 issues first. Then if they look for Captain America number 1 and find a stack of completely different Captain America comics, all labeled as number 1, how would they ever know where to start? Why would they even know the difference between any of those number 1s? How many would even understand the difference between a comic titled Captain America number 1 and a comic titled Captain America Reborn number 1? As contrast, let's take a look at one of anime and manga's biggest and most absurdly long series, One Piece. It's released as weekly chapters and then collected into larger volumes, much like the relationship between comic book issues and trade paperbacks. One Piece currently has 872 chapters collected into 85 volumes. If you want to get into One Piece, all you have to do is read Volume 1, Chapter 1, and follow the numbering in a straight line all the way to the end. No spin-off series, no mini-series, no relaunching, no renumbering. Even this massive 20-year-long ongoing narrative odyssey is simple to get into and follow because its presentation is straightforward and doesn't play any games. Any random person could pull a volume out of a pile and know at a glance exactly where it fits in the overall series because there's only one Volume 1, only one Volume 50. Reaching 600 chapters is a nice achievement, but it's just another number. Its purpose is to denote reading order, not act as a piece of marketing to sell the book. The worst part about it is American publishers probably think they are being accessible. Just about every single issue of a superhero comic opens with clunky narration about what's going on. Who's fighting, why they're fighting, who the main character is, what their origin is. Sometimes it's a random narrator, sometimes it's the inner monologue of the protagonist. And in the late 90s, Marvel started putting fold-out recap pages in the front cover, complete with character bios and a synopsis of everything leading up to the issue you were about to read. It's crazy the lengths they'll go to justify the flawed way they present their product to customers. And that's not even taking into account the ever-present argument that each new number 1 is a good jumping-on point for new readers. Which can be true if the right writer is working on it, but more often than not, the new readers are just dropped into a confusing mess of publication history and a numbering system they can't hope to understand. And they should never be asked to understand it, because DC and Marvel are clearly doing this wrong. They're failing to reach a new generation of readers while putting all their effort into squeezing as much as they can out of the readers they already have, until we eventually get tired of it and leave. In a way, I think this is the best possible time to be a fan of American comics, because there's more ways than ever to experience these characters and their stories without ever having to read a single issue. And that's not a knock against comics. I still believe in the potential of that medium to do great things, but it has to be used intelligently, and short-term financial gain cannot be what determines the direction of the major publishers. And I, for one, am thankful that anyone who considers themselves a Captain America fan can follow his adventures through 5 movies and counting, as well as more animated incarnations and video games than I can name. I think it's fantastic that I can play Injustice 2 and get not only a really fun video game, but also one of the better Justice League stories I've consumed in a long time, while also getting a reunion of the voice actors responsible for most of the DC animated universe. Speaking of which, I recently rewatched all of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and not only do these shows hold up, they're even better now. The writing is strong, and they managed to distill the characters down to their best traits, while exposing a general audience to the ever-growing wonder of a comic book universe that I spent my entire childhood in awe of. We live in an age where these characters have transcended their original medium, and you can engage with them in ways that no prior generation ever has without having to jump through any ridiculous hoops. And I am indescribably grateful for this, because it keeps these fantastic characters from being walled off from the general public by the short-sightedness of their publishers. Despite being decades old, comics still have a lot of growing up to do if they're going to have a prosperous future. And if you're like me and you just feel tired and jaded by all of it, don't give up on what you love. Just look for it somewhere else. Whether that be in a movie, a TV show, a video game, or the comic industry of another country. There's a reason we love this stuff. And it's bigger than anything the publishers could ever possibly do, be it good or bad. So don't let them drag your fandom down with them when you have so many more options at your fingertips.